Oftentimes, when you're talking about family, one group is often left out, and that's grandparents. And there's about 30 verses in the Bible that talk about grandparents, different things about it. But my best opening comments of grandparenting is your grandchildren are a reward from not killing your children. You know, Scripture tells us in Proverbs 17:6 that children are a crown to the older, to the aged. They are a crown to us. You ever thought about grandparenting? How many of you are not grandparents? That might be, okay, all right, let me warn you. Being a grandparent will break you financially. It will break you emotionally. And if you're not careful, it will break your sanity completely. Grandparenting is great. It's great, I'm telling you. You know, grandparents have such an influence on their grandchildren and their great-grandchildren. You know, it's amazing the influence we have. And you have to stop and ask this question. Why aren't parents there? I mean, what's the difference between parenting and what did we do different? You know, I'm not the person I was when I raised my boys. My grandchildren different. You know, they do no wrong, where my children did no right. It seemed that way. But what is it that makes grandparents so influential in their grandchildren's lives? I've got stories upon stories of my grandparents. I remember that my grandparent, Papa, he introduced me to hog killing. Hey, he passed on the tradition of how to butcher, how to cook out lard, how to do everything dealing with the hog. I remember it. Hog killing days was a big thing for him. I remember my grandmother. She would let me get in the kitchen, Mama, and she would let me cook. And I wasn't a good cook, but she'd let me cook. She let me sew on her sewing machine. You think, well, I can't believe a man would. You wouldn't believe how handy that's come into. I mean, it's amazing. I remember my other granddaddy, R.D., we called him Granddaddy, called my other grandfather Papa, just so we wouldn't get them confused. But R.D. taught me fishing. He loved to fish. Even up until his late 80s, he would still go to the river by himself on the Tennessee River and fish. And he taught me a love for that. My other grandmother, she passed away when I was young, but she taught me something even in my early years. I remember her singing while she was washing dishes. And I remember one time she was singing, of course I didn't think she could sing very well, but she was singing the Star Spangled Banner. And she was way up here singing, kind of like Cheryl. I mean, way up there where no human being ought to be able to reach. And I said, Mama, what are you doing? I'm a little guy. I didn't know better. She said, this is the way it's supposed to be sung, son. But I remember those times. Every memory I have of my grandparents had to do with their involvement in my life. It didn't have to do with how much money they had. It wasn't how much money or what position they had. Because when I would go to my grandparents, their world was invested in me. We lived about 8 miles from my grandparents. And I would go and spend weekends, and I would spend summer, because Mom and Dad both were working. And I would go over there, and she encouraged us in so many ways, and he encouraged me in so many ways. But that was a place I loved to go. My first dog I got from my grandparents, Buddy. He was a collie. And old Buddy hung around a long time. But I just those special memories. Some of you've got memories like that. Things that you just treasure about being a grandparent, or about grandparents in your life. You know, in Timothy, chapter 2, and in Timothy chapter 1, rather. Where am I going? 2 Timothy chapter 1. I knew there was 2. I just couldn't remember where it went. Y'all don't have that problem, though. 2 Timothy chapter 1, verse 5, we find Timothy receiving a letter from Paul. And I want you to look at how he begins this and what he says. In verse 5, he says, when I call to remembrance the genuine faith that is in you, which dwelt first in whom? Your grandmother Lois. Now I want to talk about grandmother Lois, because it's amazing to me that as Paul writes this, he begins with a grandmother. Now here's what you have to see, that any legacy, or most legacies, are passed down through the grandparents. Legacies are passed through the grandparents. You know why? Because being a grandparent means you have to be a good storyteller. It does. You have to be a good story. They don't have to be all true, but they have to be a good storyteller. I know with my grandkids right now, if I start to tell stories, man, they're glued. Or they'll say, Papa, tell me about the one this happened, or tell me about the one where the owl hit my dad, or tell me about this, or tell me about that. And all these things, they want to hear stories. You know why? Because those stories become legacies later in life. Being a grandparent means you have to be a storyteller. Here, Lois, she passed down the stories of her faith. She passed down to Timothy. First to her mother, to her daughter, then to Timothy. You know how you know if you're a good grandparent? If you were a good parent, is through your grandchildren. The litmus test of knowing if you've been a good parent is through your grandchildren. Because you have passed on to your children, who hopefully are passing on to their children, a legacy that you've left behind. Traits that you left behind. Not too long ago, we were going through some things that were family heirlooms, supposedly. And Kim and I both realized that there's going to come a time where our kids don't want any of it. They don't want any of it. And I hope that there is something in them that will drive them to carry some of those heirlooms on with them. I know when Kim's mom passed, she got a lot of her cast iron skillets. We still use cast iron. That's what God intended us to use, what they use in heaven. You know, so we use, but she got a bunch of the cast iron. And then Joshua. Kim asked him, what do you want? He said, well, I would like to have some of the cast iron that Grandy had. I thought, cool. What are you leaving behind for your children and your grandchildren? How are you forming a legacy? Your kids do not care about all those things that you have stored in the attic. Those things that you will not throw away, they will. Just being honest. It's not going to have as meaningful of a role in their lives as it has been in yours. But what they will pass down and what they do want to know is your story. I love when Paul says, and your grandmother Lois. He knew of Lois. He had heard of Lois. He saw the evidence of Lois. Paul understood that. You know, grandparents, number two, they play a strong spiritual role. My granddaddy, R.D., the Hardy family was not gifted with singing. Now, my aunt, she can play the piano great. I mean, fantastically. But Granddaddy, he couldn't carry a tune in a bucket. But he could play a harmonica. And what Granddaddy did was he began to lead the music at Second Baptist Church in Savannah, Tennessee. Oh, it was bad. It was really bad. But then he'd play his harmonica, and it was pretty good. And folks began to just shower him with compliments, which was bad for my granddaddy. Because compliments meant do more of it to him. But I still remember his heart in wanting to serve his church and his Lord with whatever he could. Remember that. I want to be like Granddaddy. I want to be like him. It's not just with the parents. You and I have a spiritual road. Our grandchildren need to know what's important to us. What's important to you? Well, your relationship with Christ ought to be the first thing you want to pass on. You say, well, their parents, or they're not taking them to church, or the parents, they're not doing this, they're not doing that. That's okay. They're the parents. Your job is, when you're around your grandchildren, is to proclaim the name of Jesus somehow, some way, some fashion. And I'm going to tell you this, grandparents, your grandkids will listen to you. While they may not listen to their parents, they will listen to you because they trust you. They love being with you and around you. They'll listen to you. Faithful grandparents must invest also intentionally. Make it intentional work in your grandchildren's life. When things don't go well for them, encourage them. Explain to them that life is not always fair. And you don't get everything you want because not everybody are grandparents. I don't know about you, but I know with my grandchildren say, hey, Papa, I want this. One of them is into hunting and fishing, and he's already cost me 3 guns, 2 rod and reels, and a whole tackle box. He's already, every time, when he comes to see me, he wants to go through the tackle box. The other one's into cooking, baking, and Star Wars. Have you bought Star Wars stuff lately? My great Lego Star Wars is ridiculous. You know, first time he said something to us, he told Kim, he said, Mimi, I want a Lego Star Wars, one of the planes that fly, or whatever those things are, that flies around, and one of the little creature things. That's what he wanted out of Legos. You can tell I'm big on that, but Kim said, okay, hon, Mimi will get you that for a Happy. Y'all know what a Happy is? We have not just you. We have conditioned our kids that when we come, we bring a happy. Our grandkids. It doesn't have to be much, but it's a happy. Now, happies are beginning to cost more. They sent us a list, Fisher did, of what he wanted for his birthday, which is coming up this month. And my gracious, that boy must think we own a gold island or something, because it was just big, expensive little things that's going to last about 3 weeks. What will I tell you about Star Wars? Baking, yeah, and what they like. So now, we're invested in the next chef. We're invested in him. We're encouraging in him. Whatever he wants, he's got a cake decorating thing. He's got cookware. He loves it. Kids respond to grandparents because grandparents invest in their grandchildren. It's hard because I'm trying to keep grandchildren separated through all this. But faithful grandparents invest in the grandchildren. When you're a parent, you're so busy working and trying to make ends meet, back and forth, both parents working nowadays. It's tough. You really don't have time is a precious commodity. But most grandparents have time. Most grandparents have time. And they love to invest their time in those grandchildren. And that's why there's such a bond between grandparents and their grandchildren. But we're talking about being faithful. We have to see that you and I have to be faithful as grandparents, realizing one thing: you are the grandparent, not the parent. Grandparents have boundaries. Problems come when our children don't raise our grandchildren the way we think they ought to raise them. When they do or don't do things that we think they ought to do or ought not to do. Grandparents, you and I have to learn to keep our mouths shut. It is their children. It is. They are their children. And we are there. Now, the thing is, we don't want our children to make the same mistake we made raising their children. But sometimes they need to make those mistakes. We have to remain faithful to the call of God in our lives and allow parents to be parents and grandparents to be wisdom. Do you know 33% of all families today, grandparents are raising their grandchildren? Of all grandchildren, 33% live with their grandparents. It's not supposed to be that way. I love my grandkids, but I don't want to raise them. God knew what he was doing when he gave it to young people, children. We have to understand, grandparents, what our roles are. And our role is to carry on the legacy of Christ to our grandchildren. We have to remain faithful to the very end. Now, I wrote down some things for grandparents. How you know to be a good grandparent. Number one, you have to be a storytelling master. We talked about that. Number two, you need to be an emotional safety net for your grandchildren. Not judging, not criticizing, but an emotional safety net. You need to be able to teach life skills to your grandchildren. Teach them some life skills. Teach them how to use a hammer. Teach the boys how to change the oil in their car. Teach them how to balance a checkbook. Teach them life skills. To be a good grandparent, you also need to be a patient playmate. Play at their level. I laugh at that because Kim and I, we always like to play with the kids when we go, but they have a problem. They want to get in the floor. Floor's a lot lower than it used to be for me. And I get down there and they say, hey, Papa, let's do this. I'm thinking, well, brother, I got to get up first. And now my playing with them depends on if I locate a way that I can get up once I get down. But they want to play. We want to be a playmate, but we want to be a support system for their parents. Hey, guys, don't criticize your parents, your children, but be encouragers to them. My wife's the best at that there's ever been. She always has a word of encouragement. She's always bragging on the parents. And listen, don't ever put the parents down before their children. Don't ever do that. Even if the parents are wrong, don't do it. Encourage, build up the parents. Be a role model of respect. Teach your young men and women, yes, ma'am, no, ma'am, yes, sir, no, sir, please, and thank you. Teach them with grandparents. Remember, they'll listen to you. Encourage their creativity. Parents oftentimes live their dreams out through their children. They oftentimes do their dreams through their children. They live vicariously through them. Grandparents, learn to let your grandchildren be who they are and encourage them in that manner. Enjoy and encourage creativity. Let them dream. When I was growing up, and I know I'm telling you a lot of stories about when I grew up because it's what I remember. When I'd go to my grandmother's, my cousin would come from Nashville, Barry, and we would meet at my grandmother. His grandmother was my papa's twin sister, and they just lived close together, and long story short. But then we would, we'd come together during the summer, and they'd let us be creative. And Barry and I still talk about that. You know what we would do? We took hog rings. Y'all know what hog rings are? Anybody know? And we hung them in a tree with a string, and we put bread on them. Our theory was, when a bird would come to eat the bread, we'd catch it. And all through the yard were these hog rings hanging from limbs. We went up on a hill, and we started digging. We dug a hole that we could both get down in, a big hole, and got in there, and we were a fort, building fort. We built forts out of everything. Cardboard, scrap wood. We drove nails in anything we could. I remember there's an elm tree out in the back, big elm tree. It finally died, and they cut it down, and there was no telling how many nails were in that tree. They let us, and Papa, bless his heart, if he had something in the barn, a tool, he would allow us to tear it apart. He would love us to let us take a motor and change just simple things, spark plugs. And if he had one that didn't run, he'd let us completely destroy it. He encouraged our creativity. Let your children prosper in their creativity. Be givers of unconditional love. Love your grandchildren. Let them know you love them. Let them know your love for Christ, your love for them. Grandparents, you have the greatest opportunity to reach your grandchildren with Jesus Christ than anyone else has. You see, parents have been telling them what to do, when to do, how to do for years. But now grandparents, they'll listen to us. I know with my boys, it took them a long time to understand what it was that I did as far as preaching. Because when they were young, they weren't brought up going to church that much. They were Easterites. They'd come on Easter and Christmas. But now they're beginning to catch it. And little Fisher now, he's the man that wants to give you a Jesus. You know those little Jesuses? Every time I go, Papa, you need a Jesus. Yes, son, I do. But he has put his Mimi and me together as people who are familiar with this Jesus. They've begun to see that, just like they can see it in you. Grandparents, our kids' faith lies in our example. And it comes from being right with Christ. God gave us grandchildren as a reward. He trusts us as grandparents to carry on a legacy. I hope my grandkids don't remember me for fishing. I hope they don't remember me for hunting. I hope they don't remember me for anything other than he loved the man he preached about, Jesus Christ. That's what I want to leave. What are you leaving behind? You say, well, Pastor, I'm not a grandparent yet. Okay. There are children anywhere you look that would love to have adopted grandparents. You know that? Mom, Dad's so busy. Grandparents may live cross country, can't see them that often. You can be an adopted grandparent. But don't even think about it till you're first right with Jesus Christ. Know him as your Lord and Savior. Been real quiet today because we all have stories and thoughts and memories of our grandparents. Now, what are you passing on to your children and your grandchildren? I want you to bow your heads with me. Grandparents, I want to encourage you. I want to challenge you to live a life that brings glory and honor to Christ before your grandchildren.